Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squad for boxing news and views from around the internet. Derek Chisora and ARTUR SZPILKA. This is possibly the toughest fight to call on the Dillian Whyte and Oscar Rivas undercard. I could see this going a number of ways, and it sort of depends how both guys attack this in terms of their strategy. Obviously, Derek Chisora is more of a brawler. He wants to have a bit of a tear-up, a bit of a scrap. He'll want ARTUR SZPILKA to really get into a war with him, whereas SZPILKA, on the back of his boxing, could make it a tough night for Chisora if he does utilise movement, not just stand and trade with Chisora, because that would be playing right into Chisora's wheelhouse. But SZPILKA is a bit of an enigma in some ways, because he can be drawn into wars. He can also let the occasion and his emotions get the best of him. Arguably in those build-ups with Deontay Wilder and Adam Kownacki, in which he lost both of those fights by knockout, his emotions really did bubble up and potentially flow over in some of the way that he fought in those fights, especially in the Kownacki fight. And he didn't really seem to take Adam Kownacki too seriously, backing up with his hands down in the fourth round, I believe it was, and he got clipped and taken out. That really was a fatal mistake by ARTUR SZPILKA. There was a lot of sort of bad blood between him and Kownacki, and ahead of the Deontay Wilder fight, you might remember there were some heated scenes with Wilder. Some of that has actually been missing from this build-up with Chisora. Chisora, we know, can be a fiery character. Even at the weigh-in, he was pulling the finger at ARTUR SZPILKA. But it seems to be that SZPILKA is just trying to be a bit zen about this and stay grounded. And I think that is good for him in terms of the way he approaches the fight. If he can keep things under wraps in terms of his emotions and not fight with his heart, but fight with his head against Derek Chisora, because we've seen before Derek Chisora can be made to look relatively average if you give him some movement. That Senad Gashi fight, albeit that Gashi didn't really come to fight, he wasn't really looking to engage with Chisora all that often. Chisora just couldn't cut off the ring, couldn't really make too much of a dent on a running Gashi. But against a guy like Ajit Kabial in 2017, which I note that Eddie Hearn, who has been working with Chisora, has been putting down to it's an off night for Derek Chisora, but I see it more of Derek Chisora, as he sort of freely admitted himself. He is best in a fight as opposed to a boxing match. And that certainly was a more technical boxing match with Kabial. And it wasn't so much that Chisora had an off night. Kabial was just really utilizing speed, movement. He was able to do things that Chisora just couldn't really sort of react to or counter. So if ARTUR SZPILKA, who's coming into this in very good shape, can do some of what Kabial was looking to do, it's going to make it a very tough and tricky fight for Derek Chisora. But I guess some of this will potentially play out in the fight. Maybe it might start that way, but I could see it sort of devolving into a bit of a shootout as well, because ARTUR SZPILKA does seem to get drawn into these sometimes in some of his fights. So he does like to mix it up. It's not just going to be on his bike. He is going to looking to be trading in spots with Chisora, and he will fancy his chances of being able to hit and hurt Chisora, I believe. He is 243 pounds for this fight. It's a bit bulkier than some of the most recent fights that he's been involved in. And if we think about the Deontay Wilder fight, which was back in the start of 2016, he was 233 pounds for that. A couple of fights ago when he fought Adam Kownacki, he was 225 pounds. So this is certainly significantly more heavy than he has been in some of his fights earlier in his career. But you look at him, he doesn't look out of shape here. If anything, he looks maybe a bit more muscular than he once did. And that could potentially be something that could be an asset in terms of the power stakes. And if he is coming in a bit more heavy, maybe he will opt to not move as much. Maybe he will try to get into a bit of a tear-up with Chisora, which really is Chisora's wheelhouse. I don't think he's coming to move for 12 rounds, Derek Chisora. 257 pounds on the scale. That is about 10 pounds, 9 pounds heavier or so than when he fought Dillian Whyte. So he's not as trimmed down for this fight as he was for the fight with Dillian Whyte. And he actually needed to be in that shape for Whyte, because Whyte actually did utilize movement for much of that fight. He was making Chisora work. The sort of fight that Derek Chisora sometimes hasn't looked as good in. Although that Dillian Whyte doesn't necessarily always look that good on the back foot. Whereas ARTUR SZPILKA can use his boxing and use speed and movement to try put on a bit of a clinic against Derek Chisora, but how much success will he have? Will Derek Chisora try to let ARTUR SZPILKA come to him? Will he not try to engage in this running around the ring, trying to cut him off? Will he try to make Chisora actually fight in the center of the rings, or even work off the ropes? Because we know Derek Chisora does like to work off the ropes. So this fight could go a number of ways depending on the tactics. I mean, judging by the weights, Chisora is probably looking for a knockout, and SZPILKA, maybe some will see him as damaged goods, knocked out by Adam Kovnatski in kind of embarrassing fashion, and also starched by Deontay Wilder in pretty impressive fashion. And the form isn't necessarily with SZPILKA as well. He's only had, I think this is his 4th fight since that Wilder fight, or 3 fights since then, plus this one. He recently fought Marius Wok, but a faded Marius Wok. He was dropped late in that fight, didn't necessarily look that great in that fight. So it remains to be seen how much he's got left in the tank. He's reportedly only 30 years old, but it sort of feels like, kind of like Chisora, that he's one of these guys that has just been around forever and a day. I think a lot of people sort of think of ARTUR SZPILKA and go, what is he, about 35 years old or something like that? But no, just 30 years old. He could be one of these guys like Francesco Pianeta, who by the time he fought Tyson Fury was completely washed, only at about 33 years old. I think SZPILKA is going to, he's had a few miles on the clock here. I don't necessarily think he's in his prime anymore, but neither is Derek Chisora. And if SZPILKA does make it tricky for Chisora, he could pick up some rounds, and if this goes the distance, it's a 10-round fight, scheduled for 10 rounds, he could potentially outpoint him. But can his chin hold up if Chisora starts catching him? We saw what Chisora did to Carlos Takam, and if he can manage to tire SZPILKA out and still land a number of shots of note and really land something on the money, well, SZPILKA, as we've seen before, can go. And for both guys, there's a lot on the line here, because effectively a loss for either will sort of put them in a very precarious position in terms of their career. Maybe Derek Chisora, because he's a bit of a fan favourite, especially in the UK, he could come again. He's already got 9 losses on his record, so it sort of seems to be he's immune from detrimental effects from losses, but eventually there becomes a tipping point, and if he keeps losing, well, people will not want to see him as much. Maybe he won't get paid as much, some of the offers will not be there, but if he wins, it looks like he might be in line for a fight with Joseph Parker. And for SZPILKA, if he wins, he can still remain on the fringe of the division in terms of contender status, not directly in line for a title shot anytime soon, but still available to get a decent payday somewhere. What do you make of this fight? Who do you think could win? I mean, I find this a very tough one to call. I'm sort of leaning towards Derek Chisora by a stoppage, but I could see SZPILKA sort of boxing his way to a decision and potentially making Derek Chisora looking average at times. It's, hard to call. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.